Recording started. So, starting from the top, Camille, you want to jump in? Are there any other questions around next steps towards 10K reference architecture?
I tried to sort of highlight it below in the focus and goals section. I tried to split that into Q2 and Q3 to give you an idea of what are our next steps, and then what are our next steps. That makes sense. Camille, do these points answer your question, or do you want me to go into it, or do you have additional stuff you'd want clarified?
So development focus or topics? Which one you're asking about?
Number one and topics, yeah.
A little, I think, because I'm still like unsure exactly what is the plan on like getting to this 10K reference architecture. Like of me looking at the items and the like issues that are linked to some epics, I only see like some very high level expectations of us defining 10K reference architecture, like with some proposed requirements, but I don't see like this breakdown on like what are the steps to get there, on what kind of data we want to base that and things like that. I am asking because like it's kind of like connected with all other questions that I have and like how we can unify our goals.
Yeah, so I guess let me go into a little bit of detail. There was a summary posted on the test plan issue, which I think is number 3, which is closed. I can link it here. And we did discuss this, and let me know if I should be bringing stuff from the weekly self-managed group to you two to memory to make sure that we're closing the loop. The next steps that we have, we found 3 slow endpoints when we conducted the full load test against the 10K architecture. So we're trying to investigate the root causes of that. Camille, you were involved in that discussion, figuring out what the actual cause is. And then from that, we'll get 3 issues for resolving whatever the root causes are. We need to lift the embargo on the architecture documentation. So there's conversations going on that as well, which I saw you participating in, figuring out, what are our expected levels. It's sort of a deeper conversation than just undoing the work in progress on the documentation, and making sure that all the stakeholders agree that we're certified, we're done for now. After that, those are things that we expect to get done in second quarter. Starting in 2 weeks in August, we'll move our proof of concept over from the thing that Grant built over into like a full automated performance monitoring solution, so we can see graphs of the CPU, everything in Grafana. We need to add more endpoints. We need to move the environment from DigitalOcean to GCP, and all of that will happen before the rumors that were mentioned here of the 5K, 30K, whatever the levels end up being. All of that will happen before we would implement anything like that. We have an issue to investigate and to maybe start to plan out what we think we need as far as configurations, but that won't be done until later on. Does that give a little bit of context of what we're working on a more granular level?
Yes, thank you.
Any follow-up questions from that about priorities or orders or timing or anything?
I think that kind of, excuse me, flows into number 2. Like, how do we want to finish achieving 10K? How does it overlap with the current work that the memory team's working on? And maybe another question that's not added here. Is there anything that we're doing that would, or not doing, that would block achieving the 10K? That's kind of covered in 3 as well. It seems like we have overlapping efforts here. And how do we track to make sure we're all marching in the same direction?
Yeah, and to that effect, I tried to highlight the things in the goals below where we had overlapping focuses. The only thing I could think that could possibly block is, depending on the root cause of the slow endpoints, the resolution of those. Grant, is there anything that you can think of, or Camille?
Obviously, I'm picking this up after the fact, but with the 10K infrastructure in particular, I was working on, maybe wrongly, the assumption that the support team have built this infrastructure with that knowledge in mind of what a 10K infrastructure would look like, and what that memory use would look like. If we find through our testing that the memory use is even higher than what would be expected, then that's when the memory team and stuff maybe need to come in. But my understanding for the 10K one is not to reduce memory use or anything like that. It's just to call out, this is what you currently need for a 10K environment. And then the memory team focuses reducing on memory usage overall. So that would obviously impact future terms. But in terms of this current thing, it was just getting the environment out the gate, testing it to make sure there wasn't anything crazy. There is 3 crazy endpoints that we do need to investigate. Outside of that, I wasn't expecting much more outside of the general performance monitoring piece that we need to get working.
So actually, I have a bunch of the questions about the endpoints, because like we reference like these 3 slow endpoints.
Yes.
As part of the Puma testing, I actually commented these endpoints why I think that they are slow. Who is responsibility of fixing them? The first question. And the second question, do you think like the data set, like what we are testing is just not enough to make this assumption that this is good reference environment, because these endpoints are based on very specific customer using very specific workflow, and there is, for example, pretty much nothing about related to CI or like other parts of the system. So do you consider like these endpoints enough to build a 10K architecture?
Do you want me to take this one, Grant?
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone thinks that this is like the end of the 10K. This was a reaction to a specific customer having issues, and it's sort of crafted with that customer in mind. And I think as we mature this and expand this, especially as we add additional reference architectures, I think that that will change over time, for sure. I don't think that this is like, if you're a 10K customer, this is it, period, you're done. And then as far as the slowness, from what I understood from the working group meeting, once we investigate what the root cause is, then those would go to whoever the correct stage is, the correct group for those specific endpoints. Is that your understanding as well, Grant?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, going back to what Tanya said there, I agree with. This is still early days yet for the environment as well as the latest frameworks. As for the data set, yeah, we've talked about the issues. That is, the data set probably will always be a living thing. It will never be finished. What we have currently right now is what we currently have, which is what we've been using for testing so far. So it gives us like at least that small baseline to compare. But certainly we want to expand that into even further areas to be more representative. But that is difficult to do that. So it's just going to be an ongoing effort to do that.
So if I understood what Grant said earlier correctly, what we're trying to do right now is give a recommended architecture based on what we know and based on what the software is today for 10K users. Is that, and if I'm expanding that out a bit, we're not going to let any performance issues stop us from giving that architecture right now. We will iterate and respond based on our findings later to further refine that 10K, but this 10K reference architecture that we are talking about right now is based on current state of software. And it doesn't sound like, unless we find anything horribly performing, we are going to stop getting out the first draft of this reference architecture. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And we've had a lot of discussions as well about what 10K users are not equivalent to 10K users. I mean, what are those users doing?
Right.
And shifting, that'll probably be a pretty early shift that we make, because it's just not, what is 10K even? It's a very general recommendation for, we're like generalizing on generalities.
So then further expanding on 1B there, where you said, pointing to my screen, like you can see my hand, there will be some more work in Q3. It could include follow-up work for the 10K reference architecture that could like have a cascading effect, like blocking the other reference architecture until we fix those bottlenecks in 10K.
I think that that's a possibility, but I'm not sure that we would, yeah, I guess that's a possibility. I think it depends on if we decide to go with, you know, here's the 3K and here's the 25K in addition to the 10K. If we decide to say, here are various user personas and we're going to make 3 architectures that match this and shift the 10K into one of those.
Okay.
So I guess the answer is that could happen, but we won't know until we investigate further, get more customer logs so we can see how customers are using our software, the types of personas.
Okay. So we know for sure we want to get the 10K reference architecture documentation out there, and then based on results and information that we get back, then we'll go with the next reference architectures. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that Camille's suggestion I think it was in the embargo for the architecture documentation of having customers in a lightweight way run these performance tests as well. I think that is a really solid first step towards that.
Yeah. Agreed.
So I'm actually looking at a way that would allow us to automate a lot of that, because we have a ton of different types of the testing right now in so many different configurations that like Grant is not going to be able to do all of that by himself. And I think that we should not expect him to do all of that by himself. So I think that really my recommendation is like we should focus more on like documenting everything, or the like data set, starting with some first iteration of the data set, like starting with more endpoints, documenting and really asking more people for help. I mean, more people, what I would like to achieve is like, for every case that we have like this performance issue, like these endpoints that Grant is testing, I want to like give every developer use this data set, follow this documentation. You're gonna be able to replicate the same thing that we are seeing. Because then, like, if we have like this kind of Puma matrix testing, maybe we could find someone else that could basically do this testing, and us could basically focus on building just more endpoints, more data points, better data set that is better reflecting the scenarios, and really like make it way more automated on how we do it. Because like this reference architecture that we have, there is like discussion on like setting this up architecture and kind of forgetting. But I think this is kind of like connected with everything. A lot of that, what is being proposed, we could really automate it. If we have data set, we could really automate creating this architecture by the script or anything like that. Then kind of testing different combinations of different, like, I don't know, CPUs, memory patterns, disks. Configuration just becomes a matter of executing the automation. It's a little more upfront investment, but it actually improves this kind of matrix testings later. So this is kind of like my perception about the direction that we should be focusing on. I think that, Tanya, I agree with you that there is this push on 10K, and maybe this is like the best step right now to do. Is try to close this 10K, how meaningful it is. I think that we're gonna be kind of overshooting a lot of these requirements today, but with the data that we have today, maybe this is the best first approximation, and really what we could really then measure from the memory and quality team perspective over time is how these requirements change, because we would expect that these requirements get lower over time. And I would say that this would be the goal that we would try to pursue with everything else that we do.
Is the issue that describes what you were just talking about as far as getting a stable data set, is that performance 40 here, the first thing under your goals?
So the precompile test data sets and update our guides, this is the first step that would allow me to reach to everyone in GitLab and say, hey, we have this awesome performance quality tool. Please help us add additional endpoints, and please help us building this kind of testing. Because once we have that, and this instruction is fairly easy, we could really then reach to other people, developers, support, customers, on asking them to perform this testing.
Okay, so 34 is sort of a blocker for 40. Is what you're saying.
No. I would consider adding more endpoints as addition, but ease to use is, I think this is the first step that we should focus on. Because if it's really hard to set up, no one will use that. And adding additional endpoints, it's very easy thing for us to add. But spreading the knowledge about what we work on is probably the most important aspect right now.
I'll jump in here and just say quickly that I couldn't be more agreed. I am in the enablement team, and my job primarily is to enable developers, and with a focus on performance. And that's what I did in my last job, and that's what I'll be doing again here. We will need some time to develop the tool to make it ease of use, particularly when it comes to the data set. Best approximation, I think that will take time, because from experience, that has always been the most difficult piece of performance testing, or any testing in general, is having a recreatable data set that's always up to date, that doesn't break any laws, that can be imported easily. So that piece will be one of the hardest, and one of probably the biggest that we have to jump into.
Grant, I think that the approach for that is pretty much the similar with the 10K. We just start with something that we have today. We just get it out of the door, and we then iterate on that. We maybe close this issue as fulfilling the goal. Please use this data set. We know that this is imperfect, but this is what you have to do to only import that. And really, we start versioning data set, incrementally building, while we add more endpoints for testing.
Yeah, agreed. I'm all for the approach of I would like developers to be able to just check out this framework, and then as minimal steps as possible get up and running. Today I've actually spent the day running load tests against a Kubernetes environment that I've just set up from scratch, with some other GitLab scripts, and I've been just going through different versions of GitLab and profiling them, and that's been quite good to kind of learn a bit more about where we'd like this to go. And I think it'd be the same for developers moving forward, that they can just set up environments as they require with their specifics, run the load test against it with the right data set, and get the right results out in a consumable fashion. And as you say, once we start doing that, then we enable developers to actually contribute back and everything else. That is ultimately the goal. So we couldn't be more aligned on that. I'm all for it. But as an example, we only added linting to Performance Framework last week. So we're making progress. We're trying to get there, but it will take some time. But as you say, it's going to be very much an well, it always will be an iterative process, because even once we get things, big blocks done, there'll be new features, there'll be new things coming in. They'll always be going. But yeah, I couldn't be agreed more. We're running out of time, I guess. Our time's going short. I'm happy to join more meetings if you decide we need that. But what my question simply was that, this was my approach, was just trying to implement and get the framework as mature as I can in the timeline for Puma, with the environments we can get our hands on, essentially, and get as much results we can out of that. So that's why I'd be focusing on getting the reporting framework done and trying to get the tool in a more mature state. Was there anything else that you're expecting from us for the memory work or Puma work in particular, outside of that?
Grant, can you say again?
So my question is that we're currently working on getting a performance framework as mature as possible and getting the right results out of it as well, and making that much more visible to people. Outside of that, is there anything specific that you're looking for the Puma work or the memory work outside of the test plan, which we've kind of talked about, where I'm asking for, what we're expecting numbers wise out of Puma?
I think like what I am expected is reflected by these P1 and P2, which seems like the most important items for me to work on right now.
Okay.
Because as for like gathering metrics, like I have some metrics that is able to do that to some extent. It's not really fully polished, but this is something that we could work on.
There's something there, yeah.
Are these specifically for Grant to do, or are these just goals for the whole memory team, like Camille, you might work on the first one or whatever?
I think that kind of falls onto Grant hands.
I think I'm going to have to my understanding is I'm going to be kind of on point for it, but I'll be needing data from the team, or at least being pointed to the right people to ask them to say, hey, so like the epic I've raised today, I'm going to raise issues for each point that I need to be resolved. So stuff like what is the first results threshold that we're expecting for Puma? Are we just expecting no increased memory usage or no degraded performance, or are we actually expecting a specific performance increase of X%, etc.? That's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for the test plan, and then setting up the automation framework that we have to run against pre and pre-Puma, and then trying to get those metrics out in such a way that each day we get results and say, yep, memory use this much, or IOs this much, etc.
So I guess the question here, the first question under planning is what can we commit to for 12.2? We have a couple of things that we've already committed to for Q2, which is within 12.2. So these couple of things necessarily need to be in there. We also have the stuff that you're working on this week ahead of the upgrade on Monday for a particular customer with validating 11.7 and 11.8. As far as working from the top of the memory team goals of their P1s, what do you think can be done by the end of 12.2?
When's 12.2 finished?
About a month from now.
A month from now. Pending access to the main dashboard's Grafana server, and we can escalate that as much as we can, I guess. I'm aiming to at least have the performance framework be testing against Puma and pre-Puma daily, and have at least some kind of dashboard that actually reports on useful metrics. Obviously, the test plan I'm expecting to be done by 12.2 as well, getting that data of here's what we want to see with the switch to Puma. Those are the top 3 things off the top of my head right now in terms of deliverables.
Okay, so that was this B was covered.
Yep.
This is what you talked about with Puma and pre-Puma?
Yeah, this is part of the test plan, yeah.
Okay. And then this one, I don't think you touched on.
I didn't touch on that, no. That's not in my mind's space right now, but that will keep coming up. So I imagine that at least there will be somewhere endpoints added once I start to get put in front of the right people and start asking them, like, okay, what other endpoints should we be adding in scenarios?
Okay. So Craig and Camille, this was the one thing that's at the top of your list, which sounds like might not make it, or it might only get started. Is there something that we can shift, or?
No, I would really want this to be in some first iteration MVC be done. Because for example, when I started working on the performance quality testing tool, I found it increasingly difficult to use it. So I'm actually like, if we don't like provide some meaningful documentation and tools and easy to use, no one gonna use that except us that are very deeply involved in that. And whatever it is, it could be like the simplest possible, the best, like the most simplest approximation of like imperfect, but my expectation is that this is easy to use by anyone. Because Tanya, like they're gonna be like, for example, one expectation, like some endpoint gonna have the memory issues. And someone from the team of the, for example, memory team gonna have to check why this endpoint has memory issues. And we need to provide them a quick way to perform this validation and this quick testing. And today is basically quite difficult to set up at least the performance quality tool because there is like a lot of quirks about setting up the data set. It's actually like, I link in this issue to our documentation. You can actually check the complexity of that. I would expect that the complexity of using performance quality is like just two-step process. You import data, you start running against your GitLab, nothing else. This is my expectation.
We're really running out of time, but I just want to add that that particular issue is a bit fuzzy. To complete it, we need a defined goal. At the moment, we do have, I agree that the README on performance quality is needing an update, it's needing a complete rewrite, and that's fair enough. But in terms of actual test data set, we are importing the GitLab HQ project from GitHub, which is the entirety of GitLab, and then running some extra performance. There's another command there. So it is currently there's 3 steps. It's importing GitLab from GitHub, running a performance tool, and then running tests. That's what I've been doing all day today, for example. For that task to be completed, though, like say, it needs to be a defined end goal, which it doesn't have. It's just that it's a good goal to try and achieve, but I'm not going to be able to commit that for completing that with 12.2, because part of that will be having to go out and actually research and actually come up with that defined goal of what is the data set that we think is complete, quotation marks, for today.
Yeah, I think, okay, just one sentence. I think it's not about completing data set. It's about making this data set easy to use, which is like a completely different goal. We're not gonna complete data set likely ever because they're gonna be like a new things joining there, but we can definitely make it easy to use. And this is, if I would restate the goal of this issue, it's like, I would say, make our performance testing tool be easy to use, whatever it takes. With the data set that we have today, not extending data set, just making it easy.
Okay.
You grant mention about the GitHub. For me, to import GitHub repository, I need to have the special OAuth token, and it takes around 1 to 2 hours to import GitHub repository.
It does.
So I think that we could shrink that time to like 3 minutes. It's a big improvement.
Okay, if the task is actually making what we have easier, then let's talk. That should be doable.
Yeah, there'll probably be many iterations on it as well. So, all right, jump over to the team meeting. See ya.